I hope everyone is having a wonderful day so far. My name is Monica Walker, Membership Sales and Relations Manager here at the Hotel Association. We have a great presentation today from our members to help you prepare your hotel for hurricane season. And we will have a Q&A at the end, so please feel free to use the chat or Q&A box for any questions you have for the speakers. And before we begin, I want to share some great upcoming events we have, and we hope you can join us. June 29th, it'll be our live hospitality check-in with Bill Talbert, President and CEO of the Greater Miami Convention and Visitors Bureau, and Jean Prescott, President with the Biltmore Hotel, and it will be live at the Biltmore Hotel. And July 21st, we have, in partnership with HSMAI, our Women in Hospitality Leadership Panel live at the Mondrian South Beach as well. So I'm excited to introduce our speakers today. We have Christine Gudaitis, partner, Ploeg and Marino, PA, Sherry Heath, Commercial Account Manager with BMS CAT, and Mike Brighton, VP of Hospitality with BMS CAT as well.
So good morning, everyone. And thank you so much, Monica, for the introduction. And I really appreciate the opportunity to be here and speak with you all. Again, my name is Christine Gudaitis. I am a partner at the law firm of Ploeg and Marino. I've been working here since before I graduated law school in 2001. My clients, I represent corporate insurance policyholders in disputes with their insurance companies, both in coverage and bad faith litigation. My clients run the gamut from developers, general contractors, jewelry companies, pharmaceutical corporations, broker dealers, restaurant groups, and yes, hotels. Fun fact, hotel-related fun fact about me is that before I went to law school, I worked at Stouffer's Grand Beach Resort in St. Thomas, and I worked for several years at the 5-star 5-diamond Little Mel Hotel in Aspen, Colorado. So big love for hotels. So as I said, I represent clients in litigation with their insurance companies. But one thing that I really love to do, is to assist the clients with risk management via their insurance programs. And I had a professor in law school who once said lawyers get paid to read things no one else wants to read. And I think that's especially true in the insurance context. No one wants to read their insurance policies, from individuals to large corporations. But that is what I do. So today is just going to be an informal overview. I think I have 15 minutes on basically battening down your insurance program hatches before a storm. So if there's one thing you take away from my brief presentation, it is to know what insurance your hotel bought, know what insurance your hotel needs, and make sure they match. Insurance policies are contracts, so they are governed by the actual wording in those policies. And you don't want to find out after a claim, after a loss, that your claim is not covered because of some limitation or exclusion in your insurance policy. And look, as I said, no one likes reading their policies. They're complicated, they're long, and often I find clients are not aware of what limitations or exclusions might be limiting their coverage. And another concern is if your hotel has subcontractors, you have contracts with subcontractors to do work, and you get a certificate of insurance from that subcontractor, and you think you're covered, be aware that those certificates of insurance are worth the paper they're written on. So I always counsel clients to make sure that they get a full copy of those policies, or at least a list of the policy forms and exclusions that are going to govern the coverage you think you're getting. And one example where I represented a general contractor and built a beautiful 50-story building. There was massive water intrusion as a result of stucco cracks. And it came out that the stucco subcontractor's insurance policy had an exclusion for any work done over 3 stories. So where the upstream party didn't get the full policy from the subcontractor, they don't really know what is going to be covered and what's not. So here's another example is, do your policies have choice of law provisions? Choice of law provision is something in the policy that says whether or not the policy is governed by a particular state's law. Now, if there's no such provision in your policy and the insurance was delivered to your hotel in Florida, Florida law will most likely apply. There's some exceptions to that. But I have seen policies where there is, for example, the policy will be governed, there'll be a clause buried in the policy that says, if in the event of a dispute, the dispute will be governed, where you go to court, the dispute will be governed by New York law. Now, New York law on many issues is much less favorable to the policyholder than to the insurance company. So that's just something to be concerned about. I saw another hotel with a really robust, $100 million in coverage, great property policies, but in terms of amount of coverage, but the primary policy was governed by Florida law. And I'll talk a little bit about windstorm coverage, but covered windstorm. The next policy up was, in the amount of $20 million was governed by New York law and excluded windstorm. And the policy above that was governed by Florida law and covered windstorm. So again, just things that the company was not aware of that were contained within the policy that really impacted how much coverage that hotel was going to be able to recover in the event of a loss. So I'm going to talk about today just 3 short topics. One is property coverage, property and windstorm, and then business interruption, and then other potential coverages you might want to look for. Property policies, every business has one, I hope. They typically contain hurricane exclusions. But get to that in a minute, but what you want to, of course, know is, are your limits high enough? What kind of deductibles do you have? Do you have a contingent plan in the event of a loss that you can cover your deductible? Windstorm coverage, which you need to have in Florida because the regular property policies exclude it, typically have a very high deductible for commercial buildings. Could be 5% of the value of the building, or have some kind of minimum of $50,000, $100,000. So just something else to be aware of. Windstorm coverage. One of the problems that I have seen is it's on their face, these policies are meant to cover almost a catastrophic loss caused by a windstorm. Typical language in these policies, there's an exclusion. It says there's no coverage. It excludes damage to the interior of the building caused by rain, whether wind driven or not, unless the building first sustains damage to its roof or walls. Or it will say, or the wind must cause an opening that lets the rain enter the building and cause damage. Now, that's a problem where, for example, rain gets into and causes, you get massive flooding in the building caused by rain coming in through a blown open door on the roof, or vents, roof vents, elevator, hoistway vents, things like that. So what I recommend is talking to your broker to see if you can get a wind-driven rain rider. So it will cost a little extra money, but because that type of loss is fairly common, and you end up in a situation, if you don't have that kind of rider, where the property policy says it's excluded because it was caused by the hurricane, and the wind carrier is saying that's excluded because there was no open, the wind didn't damage the building itself. So it's a situation you don't want to find yourself. Policies also have myriad exclusions. Two of the fairly, two that come up fairly often, obviously, one is flood. Is this flood caused by natural, or flood by natural causes, but so you need a separate flood insurance policy. Those are backed by the federal government. pollution is an unusual, it's an exclusion that's contained in property policies, wind policies, or in property policies, you may have low limits, $10,000, maybe $50,000 for remediation of pollution, mold, but it's not going to be enough in the event of a really big loss. So I recommend to clients that they speak with their brokers about getting a pollution policy. The definition of pollution in most of the exclusions includes the word waste. Now, Florida is a great place to practice for most insurance issues. It's very pro policyholder. We have a statute that allows you, if you have to sue your insurance company to get coverage, the insurance company, and you win, the insurance company has to pay your reasonable attorney's fees. We have very good bad faith law. One area where Florida law is not great is in the pollution context. So Florida courts will construe pollution exclusion really broadly. Whereas, for example, California will say, look, that exclusion applies to traditional toxic tort type pollution and not waste. Just either waste water or things where carriers will deny coverage on those grounds. I had a client where the issue was they had great pollution coverage and great property coverage, and the issue was construction debris on the beach. Pollution carrier said, that's not pollution, and the property policy said, well, that's pollution, so it's not covered. So it helps to just know how these things tie in together and how courts construe the exclusions. It's also really important for liability. So if a storm or anything else, for example, damages a boiler and causes carbon monoxide leaks, your commercial general liability carrier will not cover that. There will be an exclusion for pollution in those policies. So again, something else you want to consider. Hotels are dealing with a lot of, especially in Florida, where the word pollution is construed broadly. There are a lot of things that could go wrong that an insurance company could call pollution. So just to be aware. And really, from a property policy context, does your agent or broker really understand what your hotel needs? We have hotels here with incredible artwork. You want to make sure if that's your hotel that artwork, there's a fine art rider on your policy. Food spoilage, how much, that's usually a sublimit. Do you have enough coverage for that, depending on what your restaurant situation is? Are all your pools, cabanas, signs, outboards, other buildings, are those all explicitly covered in your policy? So that gets us to, I want to talk next, I think I'm still okay on time, business interruption coverage. That's the big one. It's generally added as part of your commercial property policy. And it's where the insurance company will pay the actual loss of business income sustained by the hotel due to the necessary suspension of operations during the period of restoration. The key language is, and I'm sure everyone here is aware of this, based on all of the coverage lawsuits for business interruption coverage, is that this suspension must be caused by direct physical loss of or damage to property. Unfortunately for policyholders, the vast number of courts that have issued decisions on COVID business interruption claims is they're finding that there's no coverage because there was no actual physical loss or damage. Saw it in Law 360 just this morning. 3 new cases came out, one of which was a hotel in Miami Beach saying no coverage for this. So it's disappointing that this is how it's turning out on those cases. Not all of them. There are some glimmers of hope, but in the hurricane context, we're going to be most likely dealing with an actual physical loss. So 2 things you want to consider is to make sure that your business interruption policy covers utility outage coverage. So even if you don't have, as I said, traditionally, the policy would only cover business interruption in the event of a direct physical loss, but utility outage coverage will come into play if, for example, there's damage to FPL and your business cannot run because of those power outages and damage at a utility. The same with service interruption coverage. So courts are finding that if there's a power outage that causes your computer system to shut down, the resulting loss of business is covered even if there's no physical loss to your hotel. A few other things to consider with respect to your business interruption coverage is what's the period of restoration? How long do you get coverage for? You know, how long is do you get this business interruption coverage for? Is it a number of months? Or typically it's tied to the amount of time it takes you to do the work to get your hotel back up and running. There's always a waiting period in these policies, which acts as a deductible. So it may be 3 days. So you get 3 days of no coverage, and then your coverage kicks in on the 4th day. Sometimes they're longer, 15 days, 30 days. So you want to be aware of what that is and make sure you have, backup to cover you in the event that you need to pay for that time that's not covered. Extra expenses, something else that should be the coverage that you should have. This would be either the cost of temporarily operating elsewhere, it's rent, overtime, security, temporary equipment, things like that. Again, will be governed by what the policy says. Two things to consider that clients have found really helpful with business interruption and particularly in the hurricane context is contingent business interruption coverage or supply chain coverage. Contingent business interruption will cover, for example, even though your property, your hotel didn't suffer physical damage, but the company that you used to supply your laundry did. That would cover loss of business income as a result. Supply chain coverage is a little broader. It's typically is broader, and it will cover just in the event there is a disruption to the supply chain that affects your business. It's not always tied to physical loss or damage. Other coverages to consider, if you're a hotel that does a lot of events, you want to consider and have event cancellation coverage. There's also coverage you could get for evacuation or guest evacuations, staff evacuations. I know I have read about coverage for lost bookings. I have never seen that type of coverage. If anyone has information about it, I'd love to see what that coverage looks like, because like I said, I'm not familiar with it, but as I understand, it exists. So certainly something to discuss with your broker. I think I'm just about out of time, but I wanted to also point out that in the event you have a loss, again, the policy, you have certain obligations as the policyholder under the policy. And you want to make sure you know what they are going in. Notice, the policy is going to require notice. Some require it to be immediate, some require it to be prompt, some require it as soon as practicable. Cooperation clause, there's a clause requiring the hotel to supply documents, information, allow property visits. Again, it has to be, the request needs to be reasonable, but you need to comply. The same with mitigating losses. So there will be a clause in there requiring you to mitigate losses. Some policies cover mitigation costs, so that will help. But you just don't want to give the insurance company fodder to potentially deny a claim. So really, that's what it's about. You want to do everything you can to know what coverage you have, know what your obligations are, know what the exclusions are, and do as much upfront to make sure that in the event of a claim, you are protected as possible from your insurance company. So I hope this little mini review was helpful. And of course, I think we're going to have questions after. I'm available. This is policy review is what I do. So in the event anyone needs a policy review on a mini basis, full policy program basis, happy to do that. Also just happy to talk to anybody if they have questions about it. Insurance is boring to a lot of people, but not to me. It runs a lot of things. So thank you very much. I appreciate your time.
Thank you, Christine. We appreciate you sharing this very helpful information for our hotels. And we also have with us BMS CAT. We have Mike Brighton, VP of Hospitality, with a presentation. And also with him, we have Sherry Heath, Commercial Account Manager, also with BMS CAT.
Thank you. Thank you, Christine. I am one of those folks who defer to lawyers to read all those things. So, all right, let's see if we can share our screen here. All right. Good morning, everyone. My name is Mike Brighton. I'm with BMS CAT. We are a large restoration disaster recovery company. We have a large presence in South Florida. Sherry Heath is our South Florida commercial account representative. She's also with me on here. We do, unfortunately, work a lot during hurricanes and large storms that Christine mentioned before. My experience prior to joining BMS CAT is I was the area director of engineering for Marriott International. I was with them for 23 years in engineering and facilities. So I live and bleed hospitality, because in my current job, all I do is hospitality as well. So I wanted to do a presentation regarding hurricane preparation post-COVID. The world's changed quite a bit, and the things that we kind of put on autopilot, even though we've been doing this for 20 plus years, need a little bit of a refresher. We need to kind of look at our plans a little bit differently and make sure that we're doing the best things to protect our assets with the resources that may be available to us. So hurricane season has already started, and it's going to be, according to the National Hurricane Center, it's going to be another pretty active year with potentially 21 named storms of 3 to 6 could make landfall. As most hotels are starting to open, and you're all experiencing this, most hotels are seeing 60, 70, 80, 90% occupancy with 20, 30% staff. So really need to start looking at how to prepare your hotels now in the event of an emergency, in the event of a potential large storm or hurricane. Things that used to take us a couple of weeks, things that we used to take for granted because we had the resources, might take several weeks for us to do. So we need to kind of look at what's available to you in your local areas and make sure that you have the ability to prepare your locations for an event. So what we're going to talk about is what the property can do to before a storm to minimize damage, and what supplies do you need to have stocked. We're going to briefly talk about the BMS CAT Hurricane Response Mobilization Plan, but not as much, and also what our timelines are. But really, for the focus on time, we're really going to just focus on what you can do at the property level. Materials to start buying now. And when I wrote this a few months ago, I wasn't really seeing the increase in a lot of the materials. So we're keeping it short and simple, because if you can afford a whole bunch of plywood, then your hotel is doing pretty well. So plastic sheathing and tarps, a small generator, about 5,000 watts, that's going to be able to keep your life safety. This is for hotels, obviously, that do not have large generators at their availability. But a small generator that can power your life safety systems, maybe a couple of refrigerations, your PMS system at the front desk, rope, water, flashlights, and empty SAMDEGs. I also want to just reach out and let you know that as of this week, I was talking to our generator, one of our national account generator supplier partners, and they said that generators are at a premium right now and very difficult to come by, because a lot of folks have utilize what's called a contingency plan, and they're paying for generators to be available on demand when they need them. So in the past, we used to be able to kind of source generators for a lot of folks, but right now, if you're looking for a standby generator in the event of an emergency, they're going to be really difficult to come by. So some of the stuff you want to start looking at now, because these are the things that may take you a little bit of time to take care of in the event of a upcoming storm. You want to look at your exterior doors and hatches and roofs and make sure that they are all secure. You start into this picture, you see a piece of fascia and a piece of facade that you might not be able to get a contractor out there right away to take care of that. So if you know that there's a store coming, I've identified this as a potential projectile or an issue, you want to take care of that now. Gutters, fascia boards, shingles, all those things that when you do a visual inspection and that just looks a little bit suspect, these are the things you want to take care of now, because we know it might not have a storm on the radar now, but if something pops up in the next 2 weeks, everybody's going to be scrambling for the same people to come out there. And like most of the country, labor is at a premium right now. Making sure your drainage is adequate. I know it's a wet time of season for you guys down there, so you have the ability during a moderate rain event to go around and just take a look and make sure that all your drainage is going away from the foundation, away from the building. If you do have issues, now's the time to address that. Make sure that you're getting stuff well away from your foundation, because in a large event, when you have 5 to 15 inches of rain, that stuff starts seeping back and going the wrong direction. You're really in for you've got some potential issues. Landscaping and limbs. This is something that doesn't necessarily get looked at quite often, but things that hang over your roof that are touching your building, make sure you are taking care of those now. Making sure that when in a high wind event, typically what you want to do is make sure that your trees are at least 3 feet away from the side of your building and not hanging over your roof. What happens if they're within 3 feet, they have the potential to scrape the siding of your building and do some damage. And then also the leaves and limbs that may become falling off and fall onto your roof have the potential to clog your drains, especially on flat roofs, and create an unsafe condition when you have that additional weight from water weight on your flat drains, or flat roofs, I'm sorry. So some other things to start looking now is, in the past, most hotels, all hotels have a storm preparation plan. Well, a lot has changed. A lot of personnel has changed. A lot of personnel is not coming back. So make sure you review those plans now, and make sure you've got, you might have to reassign some of those tasks that were assigned to someone else who's no longer there, or that position is no longer there. And redistribute those responsibilities. Make sure people know what those responsibilities are. Do a dry run in the event that you, if you've got the time, so that when this stuff happens, you're not doing this for the first time, scrambling around and trying to see who's supposed to call the electrician, who's supposed to call the elevator company, who's supposed to call and make sure we have enough water. If you've got a emergency generator, test it now and use your transfer switches. Make sure that they are operating properly, and check your emergency lighting. Also, update your emergency vendor list. This is your plumbers, your electricians, your roofing companies. Are these guys still in business? Are they still available? Are you still a preferred vendor for them? Will they respond to you? And this is where you need to have maybe an uncomfortable conversation and say, hey, in the event of an emergency, if it hits the fan, can you come to me and be a reliable partner? If they don't have that capacity, you need to make sure that you have a backup plan to that. So these are some of the things that we may not have thought about. We always used to just call Billy. Billy was always there. He was a great contract, but now Billy's got 3 less people working for him, and you need to find out, does he have the capacity to make you a priority in the event of an emergency? Check your storm and supply inventory. Once again, even just from a delivery perspective, we see delays in delivery. Just because you can get 50 cases of water doesn't mean that the local folks can get it to your doorstep in a timely fashion. So check your storm supply inventory, have a rational expectation of what you think you need to do and get that stuff taken care of. Get up on your roof. I know Florida's got their requirements to have a roof that has all the equipment tied down. Make sure you're getting up there and checking that. Give it the good shake test, inspecting it, making sure it's good now. Because once again, if you all of a sudden you find that you've got 20% of your equipment needs to have some maintenance done to it, do you have the folks on staff to do that? And if not, do you have the ability to call somebody else to come in and do that for you? Locate your latest asbestos survey. It's been a long year. Florida requires an asbestos survey prior to any building material being removed. So it usually has to be within 1 year, and making sure you have that on file. It's a couple $100s to get one taken care of, and making sure you have it on site. That just makes sure there's no delays in getting your building back up and running if it's needed. If there are building materials that need to be removed and we have the asbestos survey on site, then we can start getting away and taking care of things right away for you. As Christine can probably attest to this stuff, for taking photos of the exterior from different vantage points to show prior condition. This is critically important, because you don't want to have a fight with your insurance company to say, well, this was a pre-existing condition, this wasn't. Having the ability to have photo evidence of the things that are in your existing condition prior to your storm is super important. And, you know, the ability with an iPhone nowadays to go out there and take several pictures from several vantage points is important. And by the way, these are all things you should do 5 or 6 days before a storm. Once again, inspecting all roofs. You know, just because you inspected it, you know, 3-4 weeks ago doesn't mean that debris, landscaping materials, trash couldn't come back up, fly up there and clog some of your drains and become an issue for you. So making sure you get up there and clean those drains off. And then before 1 to 2 days before landfall, if you've got storage materials or storage containers on your locations, making sure that they're secure. If you've got a renovation going on, making sure that your contractor's got materials out of the way, because in a major wind event, those things become projectiles, and make sure they're all battened down or put inside of a storage container that is secure. Instruct guests and associates not to park near trees because they could fall down and cause damage. Assess your furniture situation, so your benches, your trash cans, your pool furniture. Make sure they're either removed and put into a safe location, or that you've got them secured to a point where they will not become a projectile. So when the storm's about to hit, make sure you park your elevators above ground floor. Elevators should be taken out of service in most instances, unless you've got a major high rise, because if you have power outages, you know, you don't want to have guests stuck in those elevators. And even if you have generators have issues in storms and you don't have that reliability. But also making sure you park them above that ground floor, because if there's a flooding event, making sure that they do not incur any damage is going to be as important. Turning off automatic doors. So your revolving door, your sliding doors, you just turn the switch off, the manual switch off, so or the automatic switch off. So when debris does fly by, it's not opening those doors for you and bringing the elements inside of your lobby, your hotel area. So if you do need to open those doors, you just have to do it manually. And making sure all your phones and radios are fully charged. That's kind of a basic, but if you have battery packs, I think those are really critical nowadays, and they're pretty portable and they can pack a punch. Making sure you can, you know, charge 5 or 6 phones at a time or within one charge. It's really important, and having that kind of ability. My contact information, if you ever do need us, we do not discriminate against any hotels. We love you all. So if you need to give us a call, please do. And then there's also an 800 number. That's a nationwide number to give us a call in the case that you need us, any event, large or small. And I think that's it for questions for us.
Thanks so much, Mike, for the presentation. If anyone has any questions or comments, feel free to use the chat box or the Q&A box for our speakers. You're muted, Mike.
Someone asked us to go back one page on the presentation, but I don't know what page you would like me to go back to.
Mike, it's the second page.
All right, stand by. Uh-oh. There we go. All right. Is that the page we were looking for? Is that what we're looking for there?
I would say go to the third page, actually, third page.
Okay.
I think, can you discuss how we actually respond on our mobilization plan to a hurricane?
If everybody wants to hear that, sure. So in our event, and what we do at BMS CAT, as in most companies, is, you know, 6 or 7 days before a storm, we start monitoring it. I start sending communications out to typically the point of contacts for some of our corporate locations and letting them know what our strategy is and how we're going to mobilize. As we get into that 3 to 4 day range and that cone starts to get a little bit tighter, we start to mobilize our assets, typically from around the country, because we are a privately owned company and we own all of our assets. We'll be able to bring trailers and personnel from all over the country, depending on the size of the storm, and mobilize those into strategic areas that are not putting our equipment into danger, but being able to be quickly mobilized when the storm does hit. And then within 2 to 3 days, that 1 to 2 days, we usually bring manpower in right outside the cone, so we're able to have a quick response time. And then day of, as soon as it's cleared and safe to do so, we'll start bringing our equipment in. And we typically modulate our response based on the amount of national accounts that we have in a local area. So in South Florida, where we have a pretty large national account presence, we bring a lot of material and equipment in to make sure that we can cover all the hotels that are relying on us. Not just hotels, but we do all commercial and locations. So yeah, we base it a lot based on our national account presence, and we've got stuff from all over the country that we can mobilize from.
Okay, well, if we don't have any further comments or questions, the webinar will be recorded and shared with all of our attendees. And if you have any questions for the speakers, we will share their contact information. Feel free to reach out to them as well. I want to thank Christine, Sherry, and Mike for presenting today and sharing this information for our hotels. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Monica.
Have a wonderful day, everyone.
Thank you.
Take care.